The 5th floor had no elevator, which meant if Liam caught me here, I wouldn't have the strength to run. My lungs burned by the time I hit the 3rd landing. The stairwell smelled like old dust and rusted pipes, that sour metal scent buildings get when they're tired of standing. Paint peeled from the walls in loose curls, like the place was shedding. A single bulb flickered overhead, buzzing every time I passed beneath it, threatening to give up just like my legs wanted to. I kept moving. The flash drive pressed cold against my ribs, taped flat beneath my shirt. Tiny, worth more than my life. Worth more than his, too, if I was honest about what I'd taken. 4th floor. My breath stuttered. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to hide, to curl inward the way I'd been trained to. Laughable, really. Being an Omega meant the warnings came early. Too early. The shift in the air, the tightening in my chest, the prickle along the back of my neck. Alpha. I slowed despite myself. By the time my foot hit the 5th floor step, I knew. He was already here. I didn't hear him. No boots. No breath. No tell. Liam never needed sound to announce himself, not when the room did it for him. The stairwell felt smaller, denser, like the walls had leaned in an inch just to listen. I turned, and he was there. For half a second, we just stared at each other. His hair was darker than I remembered, or maybe the light was lying. His face was cut sharp with exhaustion, jaw tight, eyes the same impossible gray that used to mean safety. Used to. Then his hand was on my collar. My back hit the wall hard enough to knock the air out of me, but not hard enough to hurt. That was the worst part. He pinned me the way he pinned suspects, clean angles, controlled pressure, professional, efficient. He could have slammed me harder, could have broken something. He didn't. Our faces were close, too close. I hated that my first thought wasn't fear, it was relief. His gaze flicked over me, cataloging damage. My breathing, my hands, the hollow under my eyes. I saw the moment memory tried to surface, and the way he crushed it just as fast. "Run out of stairs?" he asked quietly. I swallowed. Anger flared, sharp and sudden, burning through the fear like it finally got permission. "You always had timing issues," I shot back. His grip tightened a fraction. Not enough to threaten, just enough to remind me he could. I leaned into the wall, met his stare, forced the words through clenched teeth. "You have no idea what we stepped into." For the first time, something cracked. Just a hairline fracture. But I felt it. The hesitation, the war behind his eyes. Orders pressing in from one side, memory from the other. Me, standing exactly where I shouldn't exist anymore. His thumb hovered near his comm, didn't touch it. The stairwell buzzed. The light flickered. And Liam Cross, elite operative of Barrier, didn't make the call. Not yet. We didn't speak as we moved. Liam pushed open the fire exit door and the night air slammed into us, cold and sharp. The stairwell gave way to open space, metal grates, a narrow landing slick with old rain. He went first without looking back. I followed without thinking. That was the dangerous part. Our pace locked in almost immediately. 2 steps, turn, 3 strides, duck. Muscle memory didn't care that we were supposed to be enemies now. My body still knew his rhythm, when to slow, when to cut left before he signaled. We took the rooftop ladder at the same time, hands brushing for half a breath, before snapping away. I told myself it meant nothing. The city sprawled wide and dark above us. Rooftops rolled into alleys, fire escapes spiderwebbing down brick walls. Somewhere below, a siren wailed. Too far to matter, too close to ignore. Retrieve asset. The order slid into my mind without warning, as clear as if the briefing room lights were still buzzing overhead. Liam standing straight, jaw set. Me 3 chairs down, half hidden behind a console. Asset. Not person. Useful Omega, one of the handlers had joked once, back when I still ate lunch with the team. Like I couldn't hear them through the walls. Like usefulness was the same thing as belonging. I shook the memory away and jumped the gap between buildings. My landing wasn't graceful, but Liam's hand appeared at my elbow anyway, steadying me until my balance came back. He let go immediately, like he'd burned himself. We dropped into an alley and ran again. Trash bags burst under our feet. Someone cursed from a window above. Still no gunfire. No drones. Too quiet. Liam slowed near the loading docks, pausing just long enough to glance at his wrist. His mouth tightened. No alert. No override tone. No inbound orders screaming for correction. Barrier never missed. Unless someone made sure they couldn't see. I watched him. Not his face, but the space between breaths, the slight angle of his shoulders. He was still moving like the mission was active, like he expected contact any second. But he hadn't checked his comm again. Hadn't demanded I surrender anything. Hadn't said my name like an accusation. The realization settled heavy in my stomach. He was already off script. "You're quiet," I said, keeping my voice light. "Not suspicious, just observant. So are you. That's usually when you tell me to stop thinking." For the first time since the stairwell, he almost smiled. Almost. We turned another corner, disappearing deeper into shadow. Above us, the city blinked, unaware it had just lost its grip on us. I didn't know who was blocking Barrier's signal. I didn't know how long it would last. But I knew this much. Liam Cross was running with me. And silence right now was his first act of betrayal. The motel looked like it had given up on being found a long time ago. One flickering neon sign, half of an E buzzing like a dying insect, announced Vac NCW with more honesty than style. The place squatted between a closed laundromat and a chain-link fence that led nowhere important. Liam pulled us in without asking. I followed because not following felt louder. The room smelled like mold and old cigarettes trying to disguise each other. One bed. A thin blanket folded too precisely to have ever been used. A small table with a chair that leaned slightly left. The mirror above the sink was cracked straight down the middle, splitting my reflection into two tired versions of myself that couldn't agree on which one was real. Liam locked the door, checked the window, checked the door again. Then he leaned back against the wall, eyes flicking to every shadow like they might move if he didn't watch them closely enough. We didn't discuss staying. We just didn't leave. "I'll take the floor," I said, because someone had to start pretending this was normal. "Negative," he replied, automatic. "You need sleep." I snorted. That's rich. Coming from the guy who hasn't blinked since the stairwell. One corner of his mouth twitched. That was the whole reaction. The unspoken agreement settled between us, fragile and tense. His gun stayed in hand, or close enough to count. Mine stayed hidden where it always had, pressed warm against my side under fabric and tape. Weapons, to him. Data, to me. We were apparently still good at dividing responsibility. I kicked off my shoes and counted the steps to the door without thinking. 7, 7.5 if I turned too wide. The window was 4 steps past that, but the glass was old, loud. A bad option, Liam noticed. "Planning an escape?" he asked quietly. "Planning everything," I shot back. "You taught me that." He didn't deny it. I sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch him. Careful not to brush his knee, or lean too far, or let my instincts do something unforgivable like seek warmth. The mattress dipped anyway, reacting to his weight from across the room like it remembered him. He never took off his jacket, didn't unload the weapon, didn't sit, didn't sleep. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of electricity in the walls. Every sound felt amplified. The buzz of the sign outside, his breathing, the slow tick of the room settling around us. "You still hate cheap places?" I asked into the dark. "No." I waited. "They don't expect trouble," he added. I smiled without meaning to. It faded, just as fast. The space between us was nothing, and it hurt worse than distance ever had. The office building had been emptied in a hurry. That much was obvious the second we slipped inside. Desks were crooked, chairs abandoned mid-roll, a coffee mug shattered near the elevator banks. The air was wrong, stale, metallic, holding on to echoes it shouldn't have remembered. Concrete, glass, sound that didn't quite fade. We moved fast at first. Instinct. Check corners. Clear rooms. Liam took point, weapon raised, body angled to shield without announcing it. I followed a step behind, boots crunching softly on broken glass. Then it hit me. I stopped so hard Liam nearly ran into my back. "Toby," he murmured, warning already laced into my name. "I know," I said, though I wasn't sure he could hear me properly anymore. I closed my eyes. Scanning had never been visual. Anyone who thought it was saw only the surface of what I did. The truth lived deeper, under ribs and skin, in the places where your body recognized danger before your mind named it. The room pressed in, not physically, emotionally. Decisions clung to the space like humidity. My chest tightened, breath growing shallow as the aftermath of arguments brushed against me, raised. Voices without sound, the bitter sting of regret, the hollow ache of consent given too late. My ears rang, a low-frequency hum that made my teeth feel wrong. People had chosen things here, bad things, necessary things, the kind that never quite let you go. I staggered a step and felt a hand catch my elbow. "Hey," Liam said, sharp but controlled. "Talk to me." I opened my eyes and felt him, not behind me, not next to me. In the data, his presence ran like a fault line through the room. Clean, precise, unmistakable. Orders passing through him. Actions branching outward. Consequences folding back in ways he'd never been made to see. I sucked in a breath that tasted like copper. "You were here," I whispered, staring at a scar in the concrete wall where something heavy had hit, been justified, and cleaned up too quickly. "Before the records say you were..." Liam went still. "That's impossible." I turned to look at him. "Really look. You don't leave footprints," I said softly. "You leave decisions. They weigh more." For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then his jaw set, tension finally breaking through the steel mask he wore like a second skin. "This stuff you're feeling," he said. "You feel that everywhere?" Everywhere it mattered. His grip tightened on my arm, not painful, but grounding. Real. The echo surged again, sharp enough to make me wince. Gunfire without sound, the split-second certainty of being right, the longer-lasting fear of being wrong. Liam inhaled slowly, like he was trying to breathe around the idea instead of through it. "Christ," he muttered. "They never told me. They didn't know." I cut in. "Or they didn't want to." He looked at the empty office as if it had betrayed him. And for the first time since the 5th floor, I saw it clearly. Liam wasn't just hunting ghosts. He'd been standing in them his whole life, unaware they could touch back. The first time I worked with Liam, I almost got us killed. I remember the room too well. Warehouse lighting, harsh and white, humming like it didn't care who lived or died under it. My hands had been shaking as I read the feed, fingers hovering over projected patterns that refused to settle. 2 heat signatures, I'd said. No, 3. "Wait. You're sure?" Liam had asked, already moving. "No," I admitted. Honesty had come easier back then. "But give me 6 seconds." I didn't get 6. The 4th signature ghosted into existence a heartbeat too late, resolving itself into a threat just as a shot rang out. I froze. That terrible, useless omega hitch where your body refuses to believe what your brain already knows. Liam didn't. He shoved me down behind the crate, one arm over my head, the other firing blind but precise. Wood splintered. Bullets ricocheted. My ears rang for days afterward. When it was over, he'd crouched in front of me, breath still fast, eyes sharp with leftover adrenaline. "You don't hesitate again," he said, not unkindly. "You think, or you move. Not both." I'd nodded, throat tight. "Got it," I'd murmured. He handed me my fallen scanner like it mattered. After that, I trusted him with my life. The memory faded slowly, bleeding into the present like an old bruise stirred back to life. We were sitting on opposite sides of a bare conference room now, the abandoned office echoing even our breathing. The ghosts had quieted, but the tension hadn't. If anything, it had sharpened, coiling tightly between us. "You didn't leave because you stopped caring," Liam said, finally. It wasn't a question. I barked a laugh that came out rougher than I intended. "Is that what you told yourself?" He looked away. Just for a second. "I told myself, you picked a side. So did you." I shot back. "You just didn't realize it." Silence hit hard. "We were a team," he said. "You don't break that without a reason." I didn't break it, I snapped, standing. I refused to pretend it wasn't broken already. We ended up too close without meaning to. Me pacing, him rising, the space between us shrinking with every angry breath. I could feel the heat of him, the pull of instincts I hated for still working this well. You should have trusted me, he said quietly. I did, I replied, just as soft. Until trusting you meant betraying myself. The words landed like a blow. His hand lifted, not touching, never touching, but close enough that my skin knew exactly where he would. Where he used to. For one reckless moment, I thought he might close the distance. Thought I might let him. Instead, he stepped back. The loss of his heat stung worse than contact ever would have. Feels different, he said, voice tight, turning attraction into anger. I met his gaze. Heart pounding. Feels safer, I answered. Neither of us believed it. But distance, for now, was the only side neither of us was ready to abandon. It happened fast. 1 second, the corridor was empty, peeling carpet, flickering exit sign. The low hum of bad electricity, and the next it exploded into motion. The first shot shattered the ice machine at the end of the hall. Plastic burst outward like shrapnel. I flinched, instinct screaming, but Liam was already moving. Down, he snapped. He slammed into me, driving us both against the wall just as bullets chewed through the space where my head had been. His body boxed me in, shoulders wide, spine curved protectively, taking up every angle. I felt the impact reverberate through him, controlled power released in brutal efficiency. 2 agents came through the stairwell door in a blur of dark uniforms and raised weapons. Barrier. Liam didn't hesitate. He fired once, twice, precise and merciless. 1 agent went down hard, choking on his own shout. The other lunged forward anyway, close range and desperate. They crashed together, bodies colliding in the narrow corridor, fists and elbows flashing where guns became useless liabilities. I pressed myself flat against the wall, heart hammering. The air tasted like metal and ozone, sharp enough to sting. I saw Liam take a hit to the ribs, felt it in the way his breath hitched, then retaliate, with a move that was all muscle memory and training burned into bone. The fight was ugly. No flair, no warning, just survival. The second agent collapsed, skidding across the carpet to stop at Liam's feet. Silence followed, thick and stunned, broken only by our breathing and the distant wail of a car alarm outside. Liam turned on me immediately, scanning for injuries like I was the only thing left on his checklist. You hit? He demanded. I shook my head, words lost somewhere behind my pulse. Blood ran down his knuckles, dark against pale skin. Not all of it was his. Enough of it was. You didn't have to step in front of me, I said hoarsely. He stared at me like I'd missed something obvious. Yes, I did. The certainty in his voice landed harder than any blow. He wiped his hand on his jacket, smeared red across the fabric, then glanced down the corridor and back again. Calculating. Always calculating. I realized then that he hadn't acted out of reflex alone. He'd chosen. Not because of orders, not because of protocol, because he wanted me alive. The thought made my chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with fear. I slid down the wall until I was sitting, legs finally giving up the fight. Liam crouched in front of me, eyes searching mine, breathing still heavy. We move in 30, he said. Can you walk? I nodded. Inside, something shifted. Protection wasn't an accident. It was a decision. And Liam had already made it twice. The new hideout was cleaner than the last one. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. The building stood tucked between a shuttered clinic and a bakery that smelled faintly of sugar and regret. No cameras on the door, no security downstairs. Just another place forgotten by the city long enough to be useful. The staircase started immediately. I stopped at the bottom and stared up. Concrete steps, metal railing worn smooth by decades of hands, a flickering lamp halfway up, stuttering like it couldn't decide whether the effort was worth it. How many? Liam asked behind me. 5, I said. He exhaled through his nose. Didn't comment. Just started climbing. By the 3rd floor, my calves burned. By the 4th, my thoughts weren't much better off. The rhythm of our footsteps echoed too loudly. Every step a reminder that this wasn't the first time. Or the second. When we reached the 5th floor, I unlocked the door and went inside without looking back. The space was small, functional. A mattress on the floor, a folding table, a single window looking out over cracked pavement and power lines that hummed softly, like a headache you couldn't shake. Liam closed the door and leaned against it, scanning the room. He didn't ask why I'd picked this place. Didn't ask how I knew it was clean. He trusted the pattern, if not me. I set my bag down and stood there, suddenly heavier than I'd been on the stairs. The flash drive felt like a weight I didn't know how to put down anymore. This was it. Every step so far had been leading here, even if I'd pretended otherwise. Every turn, every pause. I'd told myself I was buying time, gathering leverage. The truth was uglier. I was walking him towards something I hadn't decided whether he deserved to know. Liam took off his jacket at last, draping it over the back of a chair. The gun stayed on him, always on him. His movements were quieter now, sharper in their restraint. Anger had burned itself into something colder. "You're thinking too loud," he said. I huffed a short laugh. "You always could tell. That's because you pace when you're lying to yourself." I stopped moving. "Do you ever wonder," I asked carefully, "if knowing everything actually makes things better?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was almost flat. "I wonder why you brought me here. Fair." I looked at him then. Really looked. At the lines tension had carved deeper into his face. At the way his distance felt measured, deliberate. "I don't know if I have the right," I admitted. A beat passed. Then another. Liam pushed off the door. "You stopped having the luxury of rights when you took those files," he said quietly. So did I, apparently. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't accuse. And somehow that hurt more. The 5th floor settled around us, heavy and waiting. A dead end. Or the place where something finally broke. I waited until it was quiet. The kind of quiet that only settles after danger has walked past your door and decided you weren't worth the knock. Not yet. The city outside hummed faintly through the walls. Somewhere a siren rose and faded. Inside the room, the only light came from the laptop balanced on the folding table, its screen a pale rectangle cutting the dark in half. Liam stood by the window, back to me. He hadn't moved much since we arrived. The stillness fit him too well. I sat and opened the drive. Data flowed onto the screen in lines and shapes that meant nothing to anyone else. Adjusted timestamps. Authorization chains that looped back into themselves. Decisions that looked clean on paper and rotten up close. "I'm not showing you everything," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Just enough." He didn't turn. "Enough for what?" "For you to recognize it." That got his attention. He crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, not touching. I brought up the first file, a mission log marked priority clearance. I knew the moment he read the header. His breath changed. "That's classified," he muttered. "So was I replied and opened it anyway. The screen split, cross-referencing internal orders with external outcomes. Patterns emerged where none were supposed to exist. Overrides unsigned. Choices made under his name when he'd been 2 time zones away. Liam leaned in, eyes scanning fast. Too fast. The way he used to read intel when he'd already decided he hated the answer. "No," he said quietly. "That's not how it works. Not how you were told it worked." I pulled up the next layer. Decision trees, projected outcomes. Minor deviations branching into familiar consequences. Cities destabilized. People displaced. Operations justified by numbers adjusted just far enough to pass review. "This one," I said, pointing. You hesitated. His jaw clenched. "I remember." "They flagged it," I continued, "not as a problem, as potential. They routed the final call through you, stripped the context, filled in the rest." He stared at the screen like it might flinch first. "So I signed," he said. "You complied," I corrected softly. "There's a difference." The silence that followed was thick, pressing in on my ears. I felt it settle in his chest, too. The weight of realization finally connecting to the doubts he'd carried without language. His hands curled into fists at his sides. I knew something was wrong. he said, voice low and controlled to the point of pain. I felt it. Every time. And they counted on that, I said. On you blaming yourself, instead of the system built to use you. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the gray had gone dark with something hotter than anger. It wasn't directed at me. That almost made it worse. How long? He asked, not looking up. Have you known? I swallowed. Heart thudding. Long enough, I said. The words hung there, heavy with everything I hadn't said yet. Liam straightened slowly, like each vertebra had to agree with the movement. Shock gave way to guilt. Guilt twisted into fury, and every ounce of it turned inward. I'd never been more afraid of him, not because he might hurt me, but because he finally understood why he was hurting himself. The laptop fan hummed softly, like it was nervous about existing in the same room as us. Liam stood perfectly still. Too still. The kind of stillness that meant things inside him were breaking in careful, controlled lines, the way good soldiers learn to fracture without making a sound. He didn't look at the screen anymore. He looked at me. How long could this have stayed buried? He asked. I hesitated, then answered honestly. Indefinitely. His jaw tightened. A muscle jumped there, sharp and familiar. Then why? He said slowly, precisely. Didn't you destroy it? The question landed clean. No accusation, no raised voice. That somehow made it worse. I stood, legs stiff, and closed the laptop with a soft click that sounded absurdly final. The room felt colder without the light, like we'd shut off the only proof this conversation was real. I took a breath. Because it was you. The words sat between us, raw and unarmored. Liam's expression didn't change. Not at first, but something in his eyes did, something vulnerable and sharp, like a nerve exposed too suddenly to air. You knew, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. How long? I looked away. Counting heartbeats would have been easier. So would lying. Before the base, I said quietly. Before I ran. His fingers flexed at his side. Once. Twice. So every time you looked at me? I was hoping I was wrong, I interrupted. And when I wasn't, I hoped it wouldn't matter. He laughed once. Short, bitter. It cut the air and vanished. You don't get to decide that for me. I know. My throat burned, but I couldn't turn you into a statistic. Not after. After what? He snapped, stepping closer. The heat of him pressed in, instinct clawing up my spine, unwanted and relentless. I didn't back away. After loving you, I said. Even when I shouldn't have. Especially when I shouldn't have. Silence crashed down hard. It stretched, thickened, ate at the edges of the room. Liam searched my face like he might find a lie there if he looked long enough. Something that justified anger, distance, anything easier than this. Every protocol says you were wrong, he said at last. I know. And I still chose you. The space between us felt unbearable now. Too charged, too honest. I could feel his breathing, counted the seconds between each inhale like it mattered. He stepped back. Not in defeat, in restraint. That file, he said, voice flat again, carefully neutral. It doesn't just condemn me. No, I agreed. It explains you. He nodded once. A tight, contained motion. Then keeping it, he said quietly, was a kind of betrayal. I closed my eyes. Yes, the word echoed longer than it should have. We stood there, surrounded by proof and memory and everything we hadn't survived cleanly. No one reached for the other. The moment didn't need touching to hurt. Some silences weren't empty. They were full of things you couldn't take back. Liam didn't leave. That was the first mistake my heart made. Confusing proximity with hope. He moved with the same precision as before, checking the door, the window, the weak points in the walls. He reset the room like a routine he trusted because it didn't ask anything of him. When he spoke, it was only when necessary. When he looked my way, his gaze slid over me instead of landing. Like I was furniture. I'd taken anger. I could have taken shouting. Even blame would have felt cleaner than this careful, bloodless distance. Sit, he said once. gesturing to the mattress. I obeyed, because not obeying felt like challenging something fragile enough to shatter. He stayed standing. Minutes passed, maybe more. The city noise outside shifted from restless to muted. The flickering light in the hallway steadied, then buzzed again. Finally, I said his name. He flinched. Not visibly. Just enough that I noticed. Not because I was talented at reading people, but because I'd spent years reading him. "I can still protect you," he said, interrupting whatever I was about to say. "That part doesn't change," I swallowed. "And the rest?" He tightened the strap of his holster. Didn't answer. I stood slowly. The air between us felt brittle, like any sudden movement might lay it open. "So, that's it?" I asked. "You'll keep me alive. Just not with you?" Jaw set. "Don't twist it. I'm not," I said softly. "I'm trying to understand which version of you I'm talking to." "The one who followed orders," he replied, "and paid for it." There was no heat in his voice, no accusation, just a wall. "That's not forgiveness," I said. "I know." The admission knocked the breath from my lungs more effectively than any shout would have. "I don't hate you," he continued, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "If I did, this would be easier." The instinctive pull between us surged, confused and angry, reaching for something familiar that wasn't being offered anymore. My chest ached with it. "You still feel it," I said. I couldn't help myself. "Yes," he said, immediate and unguarded. Then, quieter, and that's the problem. He turned then, about face precise as a drill, and faced the window again. The city lights painted sharp lines across his profile, hardening him into something untouchable. Protection without warmth. Presence without permission. I sank back onto the mattress, the weight of my own hope crushing something small and vital beneath it. That was when it settled in, slow and merciless. Love didn't entitle me to forgiveness. Devotion didn't cancel damage. And sometimes, caring enough to stay was the cruelest thing of all. Liam would keep me safe, but he wouldn't let me close. And the cold of that choice cut deeper than any hatred ever could. Chapter 10. "I can't forgive you." He didn't say it like a weapon. He said it like a fact. "I can't forgive you." Liam stood by the window, back to me. Motel curtain glowing weak orange from a broken streetlight outside. Gun still in his hand. Safety on. Always on. He was protecting angles, not looking at me. And somehow that hurt worse than any shout ever could. I swallowed. My throat felt like I'd swallowed dust. "I didn't ask you to," I said, lighter than I felt. Humor reflex, omega survival trick, would have been rude. He didn't respond. That silence, flat, disciplined, operational, pressed against my chest harder than the traces ever had. I'd been crushed by echoes of choices before. This was different. This was present. Alive. And choosing distance. "You kept me alive," I added quietly. "You keep doing it. That doesn't mean anything," he said. It did. We both knew it did. Barrier doctrine was clear. Retrieve the asset. Neutralize the risk. Minimize exposure. He was violating all three every hour he stayed with me. But he refused to name it. Love without forgiveness is a strange creature. It breathes. It moves. It just doesn't reach. "I can still put myself between you and a bullet," Liam continued. His voice was level, almost gentle. "I just can't cross the rest." I leaned back against the wall, felt the cold through my shirt, counted my breaths. 4 in. 6 out. Not because I was panicking, because if I stopped controlling my body, it would move toward him. And that was forbidden territory now. "Did you mean it?" I asked. "When you said you never doubted the missions?" He hesitated. A fraction. A read anyone else would miss. "No," he said. "And that's why I can't forgive you. Because the files didn't change him. They confirmed him." I nodded. Slowly. Acceptance isn't loud. It's a settling. "I still love you," I said. The words didn't shake. I was proud of that. Liam finally turned just enough that I saw his jaw tense. His eyes didn't meet mine. I know, he replied. That's the problem. Cold settled in where hope had been. Not despair. Clarity. Love wasn't leverage. Truth wasn't absolution. And forgiveness wasn't owed. We stood like that for a long moment. Two people aligned against the world, divided by something smaller and far more impossible. Then Liam checked his weapon again. Automatically. Try to sleep, he said. I'll take first watch. I smiled faintly, even though he couldn't see it. Of course he would. The message didn't come through the usual channels. That should have been the warning. Liam froze mid-check, fingers hovering just above his comm like it had burned him before he ever touched it. The room felt tighter suddenly, the air thickening with that familiar sense of something large paying attention. What is it? I asked. He didn't answer. His eyes were unfocused, listening to something I couldn't hear. I hated that silence more than gunfire. When he finally spoke, his voice was even. Too even. They want a conversation. I sat up. Barrier doesn't negotiate. This isn't Barrier. His jaw tightened. This is above them. That landed hard. He turned the comm so I could see the text stream. Clean, sparse, no identifiers. Authority stripped of branding because it didn't need it. We can resolve this. Your record doesn't need to end this way. The asset is not the priority. My chest tightened. What are they offering? I asked, though I already knew. Liam hesitated. Just a fraction. Enough. They'll erase the irregularities, he said. Seal the files, rewrite command chains, clear my name. And me? His silence answered that. They don't need you anymore, he said carefully. Once the data disappears, the words scrape their way through me, dull and painful. Of course, that was the trade. Clean execution, no loose threads. What do they want in return? I asked. Liam looked away. The window reflected his face back at him. Sharp lines, tired eyes. A man built to be useful. My cooperation, he said. Public alignment. One statement. No consequences. No consequences. I laughed under my breath. That's a lie. Yes, he agreed. But it's a convincing one. He paced the room once, twice. Controlled, measured. A predator circling a trap that offered comfort instead of blood. You could be free, I said softly. He stopped. I could, he replied. And in that moment I saw how tempting it was. Not for the power, not for the reputation, but for the quiet. For sleep without ghosts. For a life where doubt didn't gnaw its way through every choice he'd ever made. They'd make it clean, he went on. Convincing. You'd disappear into the noise. There it was. I stood slowly. And you'd live knowing why. His shoulders sagged. Just a little. I already do. We stood across from each other, the offer hovering between us like a third presence. Polite, reasonable, deadly. Liam looked at the comm again. His thumb hovered over the acknowledgement command. For a terrifying second, I thought he might press it. And part of me, the selfish, tired part, understood exactly why he almost did. I didn't tell Liam my plan. Not because I wanted to betray him, but because if I asked permission, he'd say no. Protection had become his language of control, and I was done translating myself into something harmless. I waited until his attention was split. 2 minutes of false signal noise fed into Barrier's outer net. Nothing alarming, just enough static to make them lazy. Then I moved. Quiet. Deliberate. I stepped back into the system that had taught me what usefulness looked like, and bent it until it recognized me again. I rerouted old credentials, mine and ones that had never officially existed. Let my digital shadow stretch just far enough to be noticed. A breadcrumb trail. Contact, Liam said sharply from across the room, already moving. What did you do? I met his eyes. Didn't flinch. Didn't apologize. I set the hook. Toby. I know. I cut in. I accounted for you saying that. The alert pinged again. Stronger this time. Barrier assets reorienting. Predictive modeling, narrowing in on my signal like sharks testing the water. I felt the familiar pressure bloom in my chest, the intimate weight of decisions converging. This was my territory, my language, I'm the bait, I said calmly. They want what I have. Not you. That's not how this ends, he snapped. No, I agreed. It's how it starts. I fed the system exactly what it expected. Partial access logs, encrypted fragments, enough truth to feel real. Then I twisted the final layer, not hiding, not running, but reflecting. Every route they chose collapsed inward. Every override snapped back into visibility. I made their pursuit visible to itself. For the first time, Barrier had to watch itself hunt. The room hummed as if something vast had noticed us. Liam stared at the cascading data filling the screen. Not anger, not fear, recognition. You planned this, he said slowly. Yes. You've been planning more than I knew. I nodded. I always was. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was recalibration. Liam moved to stand beside me, shoulder to shoulder this time, not in front, not blocking, just present. He watched the system fold under its own certainty, watched me guide it with practiced ease. You're not reacting, he said. You're leading. I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped under my ribs for years. I never stopped. He looked at me then, really looked. No distance, no cold, no hierarchy. Okay, he said. Not a command, not permission. Acknowledgement. The alerts spiked. Somewhere, Barrier realized the net was wrong. I smiled faintly as the system turned on itself. For the first time since all of this began, I wasn't running ahead of Liam or behind him. I was standing with him, not protected, not controlled, not a pet, an equal. The system didn't scream when it broke. It froze. Every alert stalled mid-cycle, suspended in that artificial calm reserved for disasters too large to name. The feeds hiccuped, reloaded, and turned outward. Barrier's net unfolded on itself like a bad magic trick. Liam stood in front of the open comm channel, posture straight, expression unreadable. The projection bathed the room in pale light, throwing his shadow sharp against the wall. Names scrolled, signatures, decision trees that no longer knew who they answered to. This is Cross, he said, voice carrying without effort, authorizing override on my mark. There was no immediate response, just delayed signal noise, confusion rippling through the hierarchy. I watched from the periphery, heart pounding, not with fear but with clarity. He wasn't asking permission. He was announcing intent. You don't have that clearance. A voice cut in finally. Unfamiliar. High level. Liam breathed in once. I do, he said. Because you put it there. I felt the shift then. The building pressure under my ribs that came with converging choices. The system recognized him, not as obedient, not as rogue, but as the hinge it had built itself around without meaning to. He accessed the core. Clean, direct, brutal. Protocol collapsed in neat lines as he dismantled the command node, exposing false authorizations, recursive, approvals, the quiet hand that had guided outcomes while teaching everyone involved to blame themselves. You used us, Liam continued, voice steady. You built compliance out of guilt. That ends now. This will destroy lives, the voice snapped. It already has, he replied. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He turned the channel public. Every feed, every jurisdiction, every oversight body they'd ever trusted to stay asleep. These records are complete, he said. The responsibility is mine. Not because I was guilty, but because I was compliant. The words landed like ordnance. I accept that, he went on, and I refuse to continue. The system stuttered hard. Nodes flared, then fell dark one by one. The net didn't crash in fire or noise. It unraveled. I felt it physically, the pressure easing, the hum receding, like stepping out of a storm into quiet air. My hands shook. Liam gave the final command. End operation. Silence followed. Real silence. Not enforced. Not measured. Chosen. He exhaled slowly and cut the feed. For a moment, he didn't move. Neither did I. When he turned to me, something fundamental had shifted in his expression. The soldier was still there, but stripped of illusion. I don't know what comes next, he said, I stepped closer, not into him, beside him. Neither do I. He nodded once. Not in agreement. In recognition. For the first time in his life, Liam Cross stood without orders. And instead of falling apart, he stood taller. The fallout didn't come like an explosion. It came like a door being left open. No alarms. No pursuit. No emergency protocols spiraling into chaos. The network that had once pressed in on every thought, every movement simply stepped back. Messages stopped pinging. Feeds went dark. The city outside kept breathing, oblivious. We waited for the other shoe. It never dropped. "They're gone," I said, scanning the channels again just to be sure. Liam leaned against the wall, exhaustion finally winning small concessions from his posture. "Not gone," he replied. "Disengaged." The distinction mattered to him. It always had. We left before dawn, slipping out of the building with the same care we'd used to enter systems and hide traces. The street was empty, pale with early light. A janitor wheeled a cart past us without looking twice. Somewhere nearby, a bakery opened its doors. Normal life felt louder than gunfire. At the subway entrance, we stopped. The station lights glowed steadily below ground, unflickering, patient. An elevator waited at the far end of the platform. New, silver, humming softly. Liam stared at it. "It works now," I said, unsure why my voice sounded small. He let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. Figures. When the doors slid open, neither of us moved right away. Something about absence felt heavier than threat ever had. Silence pressed in. Not violent, just vast. "What now?" I asked. Liam folded his arms, watching commuters step past us, eyes fixed on screens, futures intact. "Now we see who needs us," he said slowly. "And who doesn't?" The elevator chimed again. Waiting. Patient. I stepped inside first this time. Liam followed. As the doors closed, a deep, unfamiliar stillness settled around us. Not the calm before impact. The calm after. It scared me more than any order ever had. Because there was no map for this part. No protocol. No signal. No reason to run. The elevator moved. And for the first time in a long while, nothing was chasing us. We didn't talk right away. Some conversations demand walls before words, and we were still learning which ones were ours now. The apartment was temporary, neutral ground borrowed from someone who believed in favors more than questions. Morning light filtered through thin curtains, soft enough to take the edge off everything. Liam stood by the kitchen counter, staring into a mug he hadn't touched. "I keep waiting for the crash," he said. "Me too," I admitted. "It's quieter than I expected." He nodded. No sarcasm, no armor. "I know I hurt you," he continued after a moment. "Not with what I did back then." A pause. "With what I couldn't give you after." I leaned against the doorframe. "I know." That surprised him. I saw it in the way his shoulders eased just a fraction. "I'm not asking you to forget," he said, "or excuse it." "I wouldn't," I said gently. "That wouldn't help either of us." The silence that followed was different, lighter, like it knew it wasn't being punished. "I can't promise I'll be easy," Liam said. "Or certain. Or good at this." I smiled, small and real. "I've met you." A breath escaped him, almost a laugh. "I can promise I'll try," he added, "without erasing parts of myself to do it." "That's more than enough." He finally took a sip of his coffee, winced. "Still awful." "You never learn," I teased. "Next time," he said, glancing around the modest space. "We choose a place with an elevator." I snorted. "Deal." We moved closer without ceremony then, not collapsing into each other, not reaching for mirrors of what we'd been. Just standing there, close enough that our shoulders brushed. It felt right, not perfect, and maybe that was the point. "I don't need you fixed," I said quietly. "I just need you honest." He met my eyes. No flinch, no retreat. "You have me," he replied. Outside, the city went about its business, messy and uncoordinated, and alive. We watched it together in the quiet, unafraid of its noise. We weren't healed, but we were here. And for the first time, that felt like something worth choosing. Time doesn't fix everything. It does something stranger. It gives things room to settle. Months passed, quietly, without markers dramatic enough to deserve anniversaries. The world reshuffled itself around the absence of a system that had once pretended it could predict people. Investigations bloomed and withered. Names moved through the news cycle and disappeared again. Liam and I learned how to exist in the aftermath. I worked as an independent analyst now. Not a weapon, not an asset. Just someone who could see patterns and chose when to look. I said no more often than yes. The freedom to refuse still felt indulgent. Liam stopped answering to codes. He took short contracts, advisory roles that paid well and asked little. Sometimes he taught. He was good at explaining where things broke, not in theory, but in practice. We didn't rush back into old shapes. Some nights were easy. Others weren't. We argued about dishes and schedules and why he still slept too close to the door. We learned each other again, slower this time, without the pressure of being useful. One evening, on the way back from nowhere important, we stopped in front of a new building on a quiet street. Modern, clean, lighted stairwell visible through glass. No elevator outage, Liam noted. I laughed. You checked? Always. The staircase wasn't narrow. The lights didn't flicker. The steps were wide enough to take two at a time. Or not. We started climbing. Slowly. Our pace wasn't synced like it used to be. And that was fine. We waited at the landings. Adjusted without comment. When our hands brushed, it wasn't an accident. When we moved together, it was because we chose to. At the 5th floor, we stopped. The door was new. Unmarked. Liam looked at me. No orders. No hesitation. Ready? I nodded. Together, we went in side by side. No alarms sounded. No ghosts pressed in. No past demanded payment. The stairs behind us stayed quiet. The climb wasn't over. Not really. But we were finally moving upward the same way. Not because we had to. Because we wanted to.